and welcome to the Executive Room podcast, where we delve deep into the minds of remarkable executives who have shaped the business world with their ideas and actions. I'm your host, Kimberly Afonso, CEO and founder of the KA Consulting Group. Today, I'm really excited to have Steve Milo with us, founder and CEO of VTrips. Steve is one of the most vocal leaders in the industry and one of the people I personally respect the most. So I'm very looking forward very much to him sharing his story on today's episode. He has propelled VTrips into a leading position in the market over the past years and is a trailblazer in leveraging technology for maximum occupancy and profitability. He stands as an industry thought leader who continues to shape the landscape with innovation and expertise after 30 years in business. He's also the host of a really great podcast, Straight Fire VR, the Real Talk podcast, where he contributes constructively to policy discussions, advocates for fair regulations, and promotes responsible vacation rental practices. Join us as we welcome one of the most vocal and prominent leaders in the industry. So thank you again, Steve, for being here today. Pleasure to have you. I'd love to start with some industry-related background questions. And as the founder of VTrips, can you share with our audience the inspiration and pivotal moments that led to establishing the company, and how did your vision for VTrips evolve?
Well, thank you, Kimberly. Um, so VTrips began in 2006. I can't say I had a huge vision at that point. I was managing about 20 short-term rentals, um, built my own website, and was moonlighting this. And I decided to go do property management full time. This was before really Airbnb had started, and it was really a more of a classified ad model industry. So over the next 15 years, I really took advantage of technology, which was my background, hosted systems, and leveraging API, and then I combined it with opportunistically starting to do merger and acquisition with the thought that you would gain true synergies and expense management if you built a larger platform. So today we're the second largest vacation rental property management company in the U.S. behind Advocacy, which is publicly traded, and we are private. And we're well positioned in this industry, which is not just a U.S. Industry but a global industry as well.
And VTrips is really great at emphasizing being a customer-centric vacation rental company, um, you know, even compared to the competition, I would say. So, how do you ensure such a strong focus on customer satisfaction? And how has this approach contributed to the continued growth and success of the company?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, it's one that we've wrestled with a little as we've grown. Typically, when you grow, things do start to break down. And with the first group of M&A I did back in 2016, we had attempted to kind of centralize the operations in a way that it actually reduced guest satisfaction scores. So if you think about it, although we were gaining cost efficiencies and synergies, we were actually not providing the type of guest satisfaction and even owner satisfaction for our property owners by centralizing operations. And so part of it was learning, spending a lot of time at the local offices in Gatlinburg and Rio Doce, New Mexico, and the areas where we had these satellite offices. And we started to basically revitalize the local offices so that they had control. Then the second step has been, after figuring out you have to have the local offices, you have to have all that goodwill, those key employees, was bonusing and metricing the employees around true guest satisfaction. So 50% of their bonus plan is based on guest satisfaction, and we zero the guest satisfaction down along a lot of different ways. it's obviously at the market level, but even we zone it so that um, different property managers who may be in charge of 20 or 30 properties, we can give them certain satisfaction scores versus others, so there's even competition. But guest satisfaction is critical, and that also impacts owner satisfaction. When the guests are happy and provide good reviews, the owners tend to be happier.
Great insight and makes a lot of sense. And I think that's, something that others, even in other industries, can think about related to the bonus structure. I feel like that's a great insight for executives across industries. Thinking about AI as well, we've seen, it's definitely impacting the vacation rental industry. How is VTrips exploring or implementing AI technologies to enhance the customer experiences? And what are your thoughts overall on AI?
Well, I think for vacation rentals, which still is, kind of a high touch industry. Again, we have these local offices. They touch the guests, they touch the owners. AI is going to help on the margin, and we do have a development group that we work with, and um, the things that we're working on are what I would consider the low hanging fruit. So using AI for property descriptions to better create headlines and copy, even to reduce the copy, because we're finding through our data very few people actually read. They're looking at pictures. So AI is very good at reducing copy, um, and that's one thing. The other thing is personalizing, the website so that every guest has a more personalized experience. We call that dynamic marketing. You can certainly use AI functions to create more of a dynamic experience. That also will relate to emails, so that again, as we start to segment, we're going to really get to more and more dynamic marketing. And it's not just the guests, but even potential owners and current owners, just really using AI to really create a more customized, personalized experience through, learning what the guest is most interested in, the owner's most interested in. Again, we used to call it dynamic, but it's more advanced now with machine learning. Um, the other area that we're looking at is tier one support, where guests would be contacting us and asking us questions about restaurants or parks, or what are the top attractions, or boat trips, or things like that. And the advantage for us with the guest portal is to really tap into AI and take care of those tier one questions in a way that even our own guest our guest relations staff can't. They just can't keep track of all of the things that are happening in an area, including restaurants and attractions. But we can certainly program AI to do that. So that's where we're going to really focus. And I think the conversion and the improvement of guest satisfaction reflect. And as a company, again, that's centralized and has buying power, we're able to do things that smaller companies just don't, because there's a cost here for the programming. It's pretty significant, our development costs, even though we don't have people on staff full time. But when you have development firms, it's a significant outlay of capital.
That makes a lot of sense and definitely will continue to increase the guest satisfaction with such developments. I know I recently read myself that most queries are now answered by some sort of AI bot from the best companies. So seeing that implemented into the industry is definitely a game changer with guest satisfaction, just thinking about things like you said with restaurants or activities. And so thinking about, 2024 and going into the new year, what is the greatest challenge that you believe the industry faces in the new year? And what trends do you foresee shaping the vacation rental industry, particularly in terms of consumer behavior, technology, and regulatory changes?
Okay, well, quite a few things there. So the United States market started facing headwinds in 2023, where we started to see a reduction of occupied nights, and I would call it more of a we started to go back towards 2019 occupancy. So 2021 and 2022 were supercharged post COVID, and a lot of companies benefited, and we had higher occupancy and um, rental rates went up. So we saw the rental rates per night go up. 2023, we definitely saw a resetting of that, where occupied nights went back closer to 2019 levels and ADR started to decline. And so, that's presented a lot of challenges in the U.S. Market in particular. So, as a company, VTrips did what you know we needed to do, which was reduce a lot of our G&A cost. We saved almost $5 million by taking a look at things where we could synergize using our scale, redundancy of positions, and then things like laundry, where in some cases we had our own laundry facilities. We took a look at outsourcing um, and taking advantage of that. So, our big initiatives in 2023 were really to reduce our costs. So going into 2024, we get those. And then, we're not forecasting higher revenue for 24, but we have made a lot of improvements on our website, on our segmentation of our customers, on the way we spend money with Google through pay per click. The regulatory issues are always a challenge, less so in the leisure resort markets, more in the urban markets. So fortunately, we are not in those urban markets. We've also stayed away from states who are less property rights oriented. So some of the states like Colorado and California, we've stayed away from. We've really focused on states in the southeast region of the country in particular, where they're much more sympathetic to property rights. And yesterday I was just in Tallahassee, Florida, which is the state capital of Florida, meeting with the senator coming out with a bill to try to do a little bit more regulations with vacation rentals. And, he's a Republican, and we had a cordial conversation. He put some things in there that we thought just were discriminatory towards the vacation rental class. We want vacation rentals to be treated like other single family homes, police, noise, trash, parking, whatever. It should everyone in the entire neighborhood should have the same laws applied to them, and even things like taxation. So we had a good conversation, and at least Florida's a place where we can get in the door, where we can have those conversations with the people, and we're not going to just be steamrolled through. And that's just the Senate, and then in the House we have allies as well, and then even on the executive side. So, one of the things about advocacy is you have to have a seat at the table. We've spent a lot of time building state coalitions in a lot of the states we're in, and then even at the national level, just to avoid things like what's happened in New York City, where vacation rentals have been effectively zoned out. That's something we were never in New York City, but that is like the worst case scenario.
And is advocacy going to continue to be one of your main focuses for the next year, Steve? I know you're one of the biggest advocates in the industry, and I'm sure so everyone in your industry can really thank you for leading so many of the efforts. Can you tell us a little bit more about, anything you're planning related to that next year?
Well, I mean, I continue to be involved. I mean, we're pretty hands on. I'm on weekly phone calls with a number of different people in Florida, Texas, Tennessee, Georgia, some of the places that have had more hotspot issues. We've also done a lot of fundraising. We have spent a lot of time getting the VRMA involved at the national level, and last year they raised $500,000. I was the founder of the Advocacy Fund, and I've been on that committee every year since it originated in 2018. And so it's something that I continue to be it's a priority of mine. It's just not something we're going to be putting on in a lot of podcasts or social media because those posts tend to have the least active participation because the only people who really care about advocacy is when their area has an advocacy issue. Everybody else is bored with advocacy. So the level of engagement of advocacy for most people is pretty low. It's shocking how little the posts and the podcasts that have advocacy actually generate in terms of traction.
It's a great point. It's one of those things that's completely necessary, but just doesn't catch the headlines as much as other things do, especially that, you're involved with, Steve. So, this podcast is all about vocal leadership. You're definitely a very vocal leader, which is amazing. With the rise of social media and increased transparency over the past few years, do you believe all CEOs and other leaders should be engaged in addressing current events and social issues? Or do you believe that only people who really want to be vocal should be vocal?
Well, it depends on what you're trying to do and what and how you're trying to position your company. I would say, the world of social media is potentially dangerous if you're not aware of issues that can be kind of a third rail where you can get electrocuted and cause adversity towards your company. And we've seen that just in the last couple months with the war of Israel versus Hamas, and some of the companies, even college institutions, who've just made statements that have really haunted them. So you've got to really be careful if you're going to be out there, what you're going to talk about, how you're going to talk about it. However, it can raise the profile of your company. 5 or 6 years ago, we were called Vacation Rental Pros, and we needed to do a name change, and we changed it to VTrips. And I got all kinds of proposals for media campaigns, and it was very expensive. And so I decided I would use social media and public speaking engagements as a way to get the VTrips name out there, just because it kind of seemed to have the biggest ROI, and it's definitely been effective at getting VTrips out there and getting the company out there and getting us in a higher profile for the industry. I've tended to stay away from non-industry commentary, just because I think, again, it's potentially a problem if you can alienate people. So I stay away from politics. I stay away from a lot of the social issues. I did post something supporting some companies in Israel who we do business with, and I thought that was appropriate, certainly after the attack on October 7th. But I'm not going out of my way to post if, just because, again, our brand is really centered on vacation rental and industry centric issues. And I certainly take some controversial stance in the industry.
Very well said. And I think that's great advice to other CEOs who maybe haven't gotten started yet. Just hearing from your experience of where you draw the line is really, really helpful. And you definitely, as you said, Steve, are comfortable taking strong stances on things in your industry. What inspires you to be a vocal leader? And have you always been this way? Have you always, been really okay with a little bit of controversy? Or is it something new?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely been something I've been involved in. I mean, I was on the Florida Vacation Rental Manager Board back 15 years ago. I then got on the VRMA board uh, back probably 10 years ago. And we took on a number of different issues on the board level. And then once I was off the board, some vendors and OTAs who I just think were not serving the industry well. So I took on a pretty strong public position against TripAdvisor and their vacation rental division, which was pretty effective. HomeAway, which was doing something called Matchback, which I wrote a lot about on LinkedIn. I've made a lot of social media posts about Airbnb, Marriott Homes and Villas, which is their vacation rental division. Um, and, uh, you know, I think the feedback has been overall pretty positive that I've been willing to take on some of these gigantic, in some cases, multi-billion dollar companies by publicly taking a stand against them. A lot of smaller companies are just not comfortable doing that. And even the press, surprisingly, is afraid of taking on companies that potentially could cost them sponsorships.
So I love your podcast, Steve, called Straight Fire VR, where you delve deep into policy discussions, advocacy, and really a lot of other things related to responsible vacation rental practices. Why was this so important to you? And what feedback have you been getting on the podcast so far?
Well, Kimberly, I think one of the things is that people consume content differently. And there's people that read content, there's people that listen to content, and then there's people that watch content. And I think as effective as LinkedIn is for some people, there's a larger group of people who just glance at kind of the first paragraph of a post, and they don't really want to digest information beyond that. There's some that don't even really read at all. Other people consume a lot of podcasts, particularly if they're exercising or driving, or maybe they're playing in the background. Um, the thing about a podcast is you can just get into much more of a nuanced conversation. And I think that's important on issues where you're trying to really, talk about issues that are complicated. So, there's a reason why I think a podcast can be effective if you know how to produce a podcast right. And, there's, literally probably tens of thousands of podcasts, and I listen to some of them, and some are really, really boring. I try to make these things interesting. I try to make it where the questions are fast, where we keep the guest moving, and we talk about basically some controversial topics. And I think that makes for good content. The feedback's been great. So we've gotten, a lot of loyal listeners. We're up to almost 700 subscribers, which is fantastic for us because this is really a very, very niche podcast. It's really very nichey for the industry. And I'm surprised at how many people have signed up and have listened to it and have come up and thanked me for it.
Well, that's amazing to hear. 700 subscribers is an incredible stat. I agree for the niche that you're in. And how do you balance the responsibility of being vocal? Like you said, you focus on a lot of controversial topics, which I agree makes for great content. But how do you balance that with any potential risks associated with taking a stance on some of these issues?
Well, to date, I haven't really had any issues taking on controversial subjects. We're one of the largest companies in the sector. Um, I know that there's companies that listen to what we say, and I think it helps in some cases drive some of their decision making. I try to be fair and objective. Um, but, at the end of the day, we're talking about news, and we are going to be talking about companies that most people have heard about, like Airbnb, like Marriott, like Expedia or Booking.com, and Vacasa, which is a publicly traded company. So we tend to talk about the companies that people know about, and we then kind of get into below the surface, as opposed to just the PR headline that's been put out by these companies.
That's great. And I think that's great advice also to anyone else thinking about starting a podcast or making really a mark in the industry. I recently saw a picture on LinkedIn with a t-shirt that said owner centric. Is that something you could tell us about? Is that, a movement you've been starting? Or is there anything really you could tell us about that?
Sure. Well, it's one issue where I've kind of learned and adapted. So we had a company in our sector who sent us a cease and desist email telling us we couldn't use the word owner centric. They claimed they had a trademark on it, which subsequently they did not. Uh, and so initially I kind of went at the company, which was a mistake. So now I'm just making fun of them. So, I sat in a conference, fireside chat in that t-shirt, and people seem to get a kick out of it. So sometimes the best way to get back at a company that's crossed the line is just to make fun of them. And I've heard, uh, you know, they're uncomfortable with the fact that they're being kind of clowned by me, but it is amusing, and people think it's better than just going at them directly and saying these idiots sent us a cease and desist letter, and they had no ability to say that they had a trademark over a word like owner centric.
Well, I also loved seeing the t-shirt. I also found it very funny. So I think the purpose was definitely achieved, and you're really great at that, Steve, of, making things funny, humorous, um, catchy online. So I think that's something all of our listeners can learn from you. And moving to, thinking about the future, besides profits, you're great at building profitable companies. That's something that, we've read about and heard about a lot online, also acquisitions. But besides those things, what legacy do you hope to leave in the industry? And how do you measure the impact of your work on the community at large?
Well, I hope the legacy I leave is being able to create a brand of professionalism that can work within the U.S. market. The U.S. market for vacation rentals is unfragmented, or very fragmented, with the exception of Vacasa, who's tried to do kind of a national brand, and right now, at least the results to date are not good. But I do think there's a niche here where a brand can be built with strong guest satisfaction, owner satisfaction, and I think VTrips has certainly the right model. Beyond that, I'd say advocacy will probably be the thing that, even if some point, we sell to a larger group, and someday in the future, like a hotel company or something like that, that wants to get into the vacation rental sector, then I would spend time on advocacy. I think it's critically important. I've developed a lot of relationships, best practices, both at the local and national level, and I've even gone to places like the United Kingdoms and Europe and talked about what we've done well in the U.S. And those best practices are critically important to being able to preserve the vacation rental sector against unfair regulations.
Definitely. And lastly, as we wrap up, we know you are a super avid traveler. So I'd love to hear, what was your all-time favorite trip?
Well, there's a lot of great trips, but Heather and I just came back from Japan, and it was really incredible. We spent 5 days in Kyoto, which I think is one of the best cities in the world. We couldn't get to Japan because during COVID, it really shut down, and it took a long time to reopen up. But just the food, the people, these incredible sites that have been preserved in Japan. There's just so much richness to Japan. And in fact, we're going back next year. We're going to do a different region. This year, we were more focused in on the central part of Japan, and next year we'll go up more towards the north, north of Tokyo. But it's just an incredible place. And right now, it's really affordable because the U.S. dollar is so strong against the yen. So really encourage people. It's a long flight, but it's definitely worthwhile. It's something everyone should put on their bucket list, which is to take at least 2 weeks and spend it in Japan.
Well, it's definitely on my bucket list, somewhere I haven't been, but hoping to also get there at least within the next year or two. So thank you for that, Steve. Such great inspiration, tips. Thank you for everything you shared with us today and stopping by the podcast. And until next time.
All right. Thank you, Kimberly.